Don't know what my computer is.
Well, thank you. Like, oh.
Go.
Anybody can podcast.
Hello and welcome to the EMS Handoff podcast. I don't even know where I am.
This is margarita.
This is our third. You never know.
What's in there?
Anyways, welcome to the EMS Handoff podcast, your source for all things EMS. This is David along with my co-host Eric McCullough and Bradley Dean. They're these two over here. Whichever ones that are up, it's been a long 2 days, but we're actually welcoming back our first live guest. We're bringing you PD Ed Tricks, and we have Scott and Lisa DeBoer.
Yes.
And welcome, guys, to the episode.
Thank you.
Just tell us if you would, just who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I'm Scott, and for the last 30 years, I've had what's probably described as the job that is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. Otherwise known as, I've had the pleasure of being a flight and a ground critical care transport nurse, but focusing on pediatrics for the last 30 years. But more importantly, it's for the last 20 years so with Lisa, my wife, and I, we've had the pleasure through our company, Pediatrics, of essentially once a week somewhere in the world, teaching people how to not be utterly terrified when it comes to really sick kids.
So I'm just going to say this. Between your sexual education and training and clothes off, just in case you need to know, FCC, Bradley Dean is your contact. You can reach him through our Facebook group. So I got to have a little bit of fun with that. All right. Before we get into this topic, as Scott was mentioning, we're going to be talking about pediatrics and PD Ed Tricks, not to confuse the two, even though we're the same. We do want to shout out our podcast partner, the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. As we're doing this live on YouTube now, we're going to come up with a conference compilation that will go up on our GEMS feed as well. So make sure and go by and visit them at gems.com. And don't forget the EMS Handoff podcast line that you can find all of our awesome clothing, including this great Keep Back 500 Feet podcast line shirt that Eric is showing off right now. Just great model, would do a good job.
But I'm not as good as this one. He's got the old school.
Yeah,
the red shirt.
He is vintage with the red. But go to the Pursuit Company at thepursuitco.com and you find out all of our clothing line there. We are quickly making it through summer, so you're going to get those hoodies for the winter as well. And also our last, make sure to reach out to Platinum Education, who's been a partner as well. They presented our challenge coins that we've been giving out during the conference, and it's been an awesome opportunity. So everybody can look behind us right now and see a baby just looking over our shoulder. In some worlds that could be a little bit creepy, but they are looking. And we often talk about pediatrics being a high risk, low occurrence situation. So we see everything that comes up. We see Broslow, we see the PD sleeve, the PD wheels, all this different stuff. But we don't. Everybody basically comes with a standard mannequin. You have like an infant, you have a child, and that's it. Right. So what do we have? Get into your products and what all offered.
When we started our company 20 plus years ago, the focus has been pediatric emergency care and how to improve that care from whether you're an EMT or an ER physician and everyone in between. That was our goal. And so when we created this program called Scenarios in Seconds, the idea being giving students the ability to see a visual we call them Manny kids, because when you create something, you get to name it. So it's instead of a mannequin, it's a Manny kid. So we have created one system that educators can use to help their students get visual cues and practice with, like you said, whatever they're using, whether it's Brazla, whether it's hand tevi, whether it's a PD wheel or sleeve, that they're able to physically practice on a regular basis with whatever toys they have. And that's the whole idea, because as infrequently as we do those PEDS calls, what happens is we forget our skills. And even I was saying, you can have the greatest app on your phone in the world, but if it's buried in a folder inside of your phone and you forget where it is because now you're stressed, you're like trying to find that. So just giving them the ability to practice their skills. And so there's 9 of these many kids that range in size all the way from, and Scott actually has these over here, but a part of the kit. So this would be the newborn. And one of the things that we would see in our class, like people would grab the Brazla tape and they're stressed and they measure upside down, and they get this kid, instead of being in the gray zone, they measure it to a white. And that's a 16-kilo kid. So they're misdosing this kid using wrong size tubes, and they don't even realize it until later. And Scott does all kinds of medical malpractice stuff that involve people, wrong size tubes, wrong doses. And that's where this kind of came about. Like, man, we own this pediatric company. What could we be doing in addition? You have all of these medical malpractice cases that are still coming in. We're not doing enough. And I mean, like, what are some of the...
It's a really big deal, not only from a patient care perspective, because certainly whether you're a nurse, a medic, a doc, an RT, whatever alphabet soup you have after your name, it's a kid. And in my 30 years of playing transport, I've learned that in reality, there's only 2 kinds of people. And that's people that are scared to death of kids and those that are lying. But it's just because, like you described earlier, it's very much low frequency, high risk. We don't do this every day. And there's all of the emotion that goes along with it. It's a kid. Many of us have kids at home, and you look at this kid, it's like, oh my gosh, he's the same age as my kid. And immediately to try to do mental math at that moment is beyond stupid. You're not in high school.
Well, and I'm going to equate this outside of the pediatric realm in itself. We can go to Lowe's on a regular day, and we can get every tool we need to build a house, right? And you can go out there and you can start the process. Most people can frame a 10-foot section of wall framing to put it up. But it's once you start to see how those fit together, that unless you know what you're doing in that time, and things are starting to fall over because wind is coming, all that, it's those stressors. So my understanding about all of your products here is just to give you that way to build in simulation scenarios with your education, whether that's initial coming through, as you said, Lisa, from EMT, advanced EMT and paramedic in their initial programs, all the way up to continuing education. We were talking even earlier, about the difference between online education and in-person education or training. And, my understanding is we can kind of build that into really any education product that's out there. So I want to kind of talk about, now that we've talked about the product just a little bit, let's go a little bit and just talk about where this actually came from. All right. So in talking to you guys, I use the analogy, this really seemed like an out of the box idea. And really it's because it came from
out of the box.
Out of the box. So tell us a little bit about that story. And I'm gonna have Lisa, because I think she'd probably be a little bit better storyteller on this than you, Scott. Sorry.
Very true.
So for years, we've been doing these hands-on pediatric labs. We go all over the country. We put on these classes, and we kept seeing people struggling with very similar things. And so every time I would see something, I would write down an idea and I would throw it in a box. And I kept putting these ideas in a box. I'm like, man, at some point we have to do something with this, because it's not just this part of the country, it's everywhere. So I kept putting these ideas into the box over the years. And then fast forward, Scott gets cancer. Worst, obviously, day of our lives. And he has to go through chemo. So he's sitting on the couch and he's hooked up to a chemo pump. So there's not a whole lot that he can do. And I said, hey, I have something that we can work on. And I took everything and I dumped it on the floor, and we started sorting through it and looked at all of the different things that educators were struggling with to teach their students, and the students were struggling. And that's where Scenarios in Seconds was born, that it was the worst day of our lives, but we took something and made it positive. And so, so Scott had to write all 52 scenarios, and we tend to do things in 52 because we hope that people will do one a week for a year, because if you did something once a week for a year, you'd be really good at it. So we paired the scenarios with the different sizes of Manny kids, and it made just a perfect blending of education, because you can do it one-on-one, or you can do, an entire training class with it. And so, the worst day of our lives turned into something that is blessing so many other people too. And
probably the most unique honey-do list.
That is a very description.
So obviously, in this instance, you've gotten something that can have far-reaching implications. So
with those scenarios, and we've got one of them, right here in front of us.
Yeah, this is the card.
How do those work?
So the scenario cards, and I don't know how much they're able to see if I actually touch this, but the scenario cards, and each one of them's the scenario number, and then in the corner, there's a picture of the Manny kid that corresponds to the scenario. So you would lay the scenario down on, or put it in the frame, whichever, and then you lay the Manny kid down, and if you're using the Brazlo tape, if you're using Hantevi, whatever, PD wheel, you throw that down with it. And they're able to train instantly. So there's no you don't have to hook up anything. You just, you throw it down and you're literally ready to play. You can do it on a floor. You can put it on a table. We have in the emergency department, they'll put it in one of the trauma rooms. We've got trauma scenarios, and they're like, hey, we have a call. And then they go and they run it through, and they do it really fast. When they get good at it, it's done in like 10, 15 minutes. I mean, you can get through these, and then it gives you some great talking points too, when you're, after you're like doing like a debrief on it too.
And it doesn't really matter whether you're using a Brazzo tape,
right,
the PD wheel, Hantevi, any of those.
Exactly. We made it so that an educator could use it regardless of whatever system they have. So, we've even seen one that somebody created a black and white. It was very, very hard to read, but it was a doc who wanted to make his own. It could technically work with that. So the very first question would be a challenge, what color zone, because it's black or white for those. But then you get into the age, you get into the weight, and the idea being, over and over, you're seeing these kids and you're associating, I now saw a weight for this kid. I now know what color zone they're falling into. And so it just helps create that muscle memory, because they're doing that action over and over, measuring from red to the top, to the head on down to the heel. And so they're doing that for every single scenario and just causing that muscle memory.
Well, and that's, for me, that's extremely good, because the way we do in our education program, I try to tie, we cover about a 20 county region within the state of Tennessee. And we'll say that one of those jurisdictions, the primary region of 16 counties, the Regional Healthcare Coalition actually bought one PD sleeve for every unit in the region, so that they're readily available. But we go outside of that region, then we go over to the Brazzo tape. So for us as educators, we really do try to tie that to the local community.
Sure.
We do know people are going to move sometimes out of state, but for the most part, they're going to remain in that primary region. And so tying that specifically. So for me, as a cost, one of those things I have to do is, hey, can this work? So that's, for those educators that are here at our conference as well as around the state, that's going to be a great benefit to each one of those, because they don't have to then buy any ancillary equipment. They just utilize what they
already have.
What they currently have.
I just like the fact that it's low tech, because we were just talking about this, how we've been saturated with technology for the past year. And you can have all the nicest sim stuff, but this is kind of good that you can just put this out. I could see this being in like an EMT or a paramedic program where it's like, hey, we got a 15-minute session. Let's throw this out. It's a good little refresh, quick thing. Or if you're in a unit that has kids and you don't get the Brazzo tape out that often, which I've seen that from my perspective, people who are seasoned healthcare providers, not EMS, nurses and stuff too, they just don't know the Brazzo tape. I had a nurse tell me the other day, I've never seen this thing before. I said, you've never seen, what are you talking about? The Brazzo tape. He's never seen it. And it's on top of his pediatric crash card.
So, they're usually zip tied in a cabinet, and you can't get it out.
No, because they're like $120, $150 a pop. They don't want them to go missing.
Right.
So, I can see this being a bigger, low tech solution, but it fixes high tech problems.
Right. And it allows you to throw them in between. So if you have some high tech stuff, we have a lot of people that have sim labs. Well, while your students are playing on their phones, instead, you set these up in between. So you're going to run these scenarios before you get in the sim room. and it keeps them busy and moving and getting that.
Absolutely.
And also Facebook.
Yeah. Well, but this too, taking that into account, as we mentioned earlier, most of the time when you buy a mannequin, you have a pediatric or a child or an adult. It's really, you can't say I want a 16 kilo kid or a 32 kilo. Those aren't there. But that doesn't mean that you go here and it takes those mannequins out. So I'm going to take this, which, what do we have here?
This one would be a 3 to 4 month old that would
Okay.
measure to the pink zone on the Brazil tape.
Okay. So we're going to get this out. And if we need to translate that to a specific skill, then we're going to take an associated mannequin that would be roughly close to that. And we can still do that hard skill. So we can start the IV on it. We can start the IO. We can do CPR. But we're going to guide all of that based on these.
Yeah, and the scenario's already written for you.
So going back to that scenario just a little bit, what is the average length of each of those? So I know we've mentioned 15 minutes. Do you tend to stay in that 15-minute range, or do they vary? How do you do that?
So what happens, depending on the skill level and how often they do this, so we've seen people get through them after they've done several. They can finish them in 5 minutes because they now instinctively know exactly where to go find that stuff on the tape that they hadn't thought of to look for until that moment. And so they get faster. So usually we'll see 15, 20 minutes at first, and then they start getting faster, and it's now down to minutes that they're able to complete an entire scenario. So you can absolutely see by the time they're doing 3 and 4 scenarios, they're like, they know exactly where it is, where to find it on their app or whatever, so that they get much, much faster. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I have to say, like, one of the things that gets me about doing this is you could integrate, like if you're like, well, I have these mannequins like a newborn howl or something like that, like that's when you use that, and then you could use the newborn howl, you could actually put in your mannequin. This way to actually do the IV, the IO, the actual skill sets.
Absolutely.
But I like the other idea that you talked about, how for the EMT they used it for you said anatomy. They have like a little index cards. That was a neat idea.
Yeah. So we get people that have the system, they own scenarios in seconds, and they're always sending us, hey, just to let you know, we just did this and we just did that. And one of the schools took sticky notes, and they wrote on the sticky notes different body parts, and then they set up a couple of different teams. They threw the Manny kids out there, and they gave them a little pile of sticky notes and said, go. And so they had to femur, tibia, like as fast as they could to actually put the different body parts in the right places. And it was a little challenge game, something different for anatomy, just to, and it could be as complex as you want it, but this was like a beginking EMT class.
Sure.
And so but it was like a clever idea. It was super inexpensive, and they were able to do that like in seconds, just here you go. And then it turned into a game. So, and who doesn't love to learn, but while they're having fun, they're competing against each other. So yeah, it kind of makes it nice too.
Lisa described about, you were asking just about how long does it take to go through it. Like anything, the more you do it, the better you get. When you play with an app, when you play with the tape, when you learn this is what it's called or this is where it's at, then we see the little light bulbs pop up and people are like, oh, that's where it is, or where is it not? But normally, like she said, the first time it's going to take longer as you get faster and faster. But what's kind of neat from my perspective as the co-creator of this whole system is I know how long it takes me personally, who wrote the darn thing, to go through a scenario. But every couple of months, we get especially really experienced either flight crews or ground critical care paramedics who send emails about how long it takes them to go through a particular scenario. And from my perspective, it's fascinating because they're faster than I am. And I wrote the darn thing.
Yeah.
And they're going through it. They're like, I made it through scenario 19 in 1 minute and 10 seconds from top to bottom. But that's just because they know their app, they know the tape, and it's like,
they're able to find it
that's
that fast.
wicked. You just did all this
hoping.
faster than I did. I love it. That is like mission accomplished because then they know exactly what size tube, how much drug, how many cc's, whatever it might be, in a minute and 10 seconds. That's rockin' cool.
And that's the whole goal of it, is to just get people comfortable with it and as quick as they can get that information, because then the child's going to get the best care.
Yeah, because I can tell you, like, we just in the education I had in EMS, we did not get very comfortable. And when you're not comfortable with something because you haven't been exposed to it a lot, you're anxious about doing that skill set. So, like, I like the Brazil tapes. Like, anytime I introduce this, and again, these are to nurses. These are not, brand new EMTs. These are people who already have healthcare licenses. Like, something they find out very quickly. It's like 10-point Times New Roman font. It's not alphabetized. And so when I ask them to, hey, find amiodarone, the first thing they're going to is at the very top. And they're like, oh, crap, it's not there.
Right.
So like little things like that to get you oriented to how to size up baby. Also like the injuries. And I know you have the other placards in there. There's one I really like where the babies has like burns and stuff.
Yeah.
And that is a really good depiction. The signs of trauma or abuse. Which one is it? Yeah, this
is part of what we call our scenarios in seconds 2. It's an expansion pack. So this one is because of all of the feedback that we got from all the different educators, we ended up creating additional Manny kids that are moulaged already. So this one that has more than 50% burns, and then we have meningococcemia, we have measles kid, chicken pox, a profoundly cyanotic baby, so that way you're getting more visuals for your students, things that they're typically not going to see or that are challenging. Yeah, so like this is the newborn, the one that's the cyanotic newborn, and so again you are getting some more visuals, things that we don't typically get in our little plain pasty mannequins. We're trying to just give them some more visual.
Well, it's good too. They can walk in and do a general impression. The PAT, the Pediatric Assessment Triangle, and come in appearance
freak out. The PAT is freak out.
So, and then along with like you're saying, with the ones that are moulage, we also have created additional moulage for all of the trauma scenarios from scenarios 1 and 2. So they're kind of like in the old days that we used to call them color forms or paper dolls. People would recognize those kind of things. But the idea being you could take moulage and put them onto the Manny kids and then take them off. Like we have an example, one of the Manny kids who's a 2-year-old who bit into an electric cord. And so we have an applique that goes over her mouth, and you can see that she has an electric burn on her mouth. And so it gives you as an educator the ability to talk about some additional things with that scenario with your students as well.
Yeah.
And then those just peel off, go right back into the book. So any of our trauma scenarios have those included in there as well. So you can add the visual, everything from burns to lacerations. There's bullets, things that we don't want to think about, but those are for the scenario, you're able to add those in there for a more visual effect for your students.
And I like the kinesthetic part, just getting a chance to get the hands-on,
right?
Which he just pulled out some hands-on stuff.
Yeah, well, and this is a big one. Every single scenario has, if your patient crashes, how much epi do they need? So we literally have it so that in the med pack that comes with scenarios 2, we want them to be pulling up the dose for every single kid. How much epi does this kid get? If you're pulling up 0.6 for this kid, how do you do that? And so your students, because we talk about it, they're going to get 0.6. Okay, here, could you pull that up for me? And if they have, the epi needle and they're looking at it and going like, how am I going to do this? Here's a chance, again, that tactile. Let's actually let you do that for every single scenario. And this one was educators kept saying that they wanted more hands-on. So that's where the scenarios 2 came from. So we added that in there.
Well, one of the key things that anybody, so we can talk about this, but one of the things is how do people get a hold of it?
So we have it available on our pediatrics website. We also sell it on Amazon, but our pedied.com, PEDIED.com is our website. And we have a whole line of products that are related specifically to emergency medicine. And the In Seconds brand are things that we're continuing to develop. So we have one that is in process right now. We're hoping to launch in the next 2 months called PALS Prep in Seconds. So for those PALS instructors that are not the full-time educators, but just want some more visual, more tactile experience for their students, we're going to have one just designed for them. Also for the PECs that are out there, the pediatric emergency care champions that the emergency medical services for children have been really trying to spearhead and get going. So it's another type of quickly throw everything into the bag and you're ready to go do a class like that. And so add those extra experiences for them as well.
Disasters.
So, and disasters in seconds. That one is a massive so Disasters in Seconds right now weighs about 100 pounds, and it's all of the Manny kids, and we have 30 moulaged Manny kids. So from multiple amputations, very visual, to create those mass casualty incidents that we never want to think about an EMS, but how are we going to practice if we can't get kids? Or most of the ones I've ever gone to, maybe you guys have done these too, you show up you're going to do a mass casualty practice and it's kids, and there's some 250-pound guy wearing a tag that says, "Hi, I'm a 2-year-old." You're like, okay,
Not at all creepy.
not creepy at all. So this is another chance. So everything again would go in one kit, and you'd be able to roll and do a mass casualty practice with your your ER, with the your fire station, whoever you're working for, and create some more visual. It has sound effects that are going to go with this. It's quite an elaborate program that we're putting together, to prepare for the worst of the worst. Because if it's not bad enough, you have one really sick kid, let me give you 30 sick kids.
Yeah.
So yes. So anyway, that's coming hopefully by the end of the year. It's in motion. But first we're finishing PALS prep in seconds, and then disasters in seconds will be coming out later in the year too.
Well, certainly want to thank both of you all for coming on and presenting this. This is an awesome thing to take a look at, and I can definitely see that I'll be reaching out on pded.com and taking a look at all the different in seconds brands that you have there, and looking how we can do that. So guys, thank you for coming on, and we appreciate it. So
Eric, thank you guys.
all right,
Great
so
meeting everyone.
for everybody out there, don't forget to go by Jim's, check us out on Pursue Company and get all of our nice gear. But always, for my co-host Eric McCullough and Bradley Dean, take care, stay safe, and always remember the value of your EMS handoff.